All right, folks, it's time to get behind the scenes on the New York Jets schedule that was released last night. Here it is, baby, right here. The Jets schedule. Juicy. I'm a schedule nerd, so I love this sort of thing. And we have a very special guest joining us here on the show to break it all down. Let's go.
I'm gonna lose my gosh darn bananas. Boy Green Daily starts now. Zoinks!
Boy Green Daily, Boy Green Daily, Boy Green Daily. Let's go!
Put your seatbelts on. Get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Sweet Lord have mercy. We have the schedule to break down, baby. A special live 2 p.m. Eastern Time episode. We're streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. If you guys have questions for a special guest, send them along, and we'll get to those here on the program. Super Chat, skip the line. Without further ado, let's get into this. Again, I love the NFL schedule process. And for the first time on this show, we're having the NFL Senior Director of Broadcasting, Blake Jones, gracing us with his presence. What is up, Blake Jones?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Now, have you ever gone by in any of these interviews Balake? Have it, or is it Blake pronunciation?
Unfortunately, I'm just the regular Blake.
Okay, well, it's good to establish those sort of things at the beginning of an interview, Blake, as we're going through this thing. Now, again, we're going to be opening it up to the fans as well as we're going through this. So I guess I'll start there with the super chat coming in. Appreciated. Dick Chimney's Burner here, $4.99, says, question for the guest. Can a team opt to pick the opponent or choose their bye week after international travel instead of the bye? What's the scoop here, Blake?
Yeah, so one of the pieces that we do have is that the home team that's hosting the international game does have the option to protect two opponents that will remain in their home stadium as traditional home games. Outside of that, we look at the rest of their remaining home games, and from there we select their opponent that will face them in the international game.
Interesting. Do you know who the two games the Jets chose to protect are?
You know what? I don't have that in front of me, but I think we ended up in a good place.
Okay, yeah, beautiful. That's fascinating. I had never heard that nugget before. So they are allowed to protect two games. Let me go to the bye week portion, just in case you didn't answer that one. If a team is the home team and they have an international game, do they have the option to take the bye immediately after?
It's not a given. They let us know what their preference may be, but the bye is not guaranteed. We do our best, but we look at so many different versions of the schedule. And as we look at so many international games being played across multiple teams, and with the idea that we're going to be going to more and more of these as the NFL grows their presence internationally, part of that growth is that guaranteeing the bye creates a lot of scheduling conflicts that trickle down across the entirety of the league. And so not a guarantee. We get their preference, maybe a home game, maybe a close road game. But there are so many different versions of the schedule that we review that ultimately there are so many factors that go into locking in a particular schedule that the bye week sometimes will fall for those teams, but not always.
And part of the last part of your answer there, do you guys do that instinctively to try to help out teams? What I mean by that is, so let's say they want to buy or don't want to buy, and they're coming off an international game. Do you go, okay, let's try to do them a solid here. Since they're coming from international, we'll try to do this for them. For instance, I believe it was last year, the Jets came back from an international game, and their next game was Monday Night Football. So it worked out. Nice, a nice little additional cushion there. Are those sort of things that you guys are actively trying to do, or sometimes that just sort of happens?
I would say it's more just sometimes sort of happens. I think we look at bye weeks especially as we don't set those in. So any given year to year, team to team, bye weeks can fall in a range. If you asked every team, almost every team would say, I'd love the bye week, maybe just after the middle of the season. But obviously we can't do that for everybody. So there's a range where they fall. When you add the element of the international game, it's just where that bye week happens to fall. The other things like a Monday night game, again, it's just how that overall schedule comes together, factoring in all 32 teams, all the packages like Monday Night Football.
Blake, how far are we away from just it's just a fact of the matter that every team has an international game incorporated into their schedule with the global expansion of the National Football League and how important it seems to be from you guys on the outside looking in, that being a part of the game. How far are we away from that just being the norm, that it's for everybody, for every team in the entire league?
Yeah, I don't have the answer on how far away we are, but it's going to get there where we're going to have 16 teams host an international game each year, and that means the other 16 teams will be the opponents playing in those international games, and it'll become a pretty regular part of what the NFL schedule looks like. And I think it's important to help us grow the game of football around the world, and the NFL is obviously the leader in doing that.
There's no question about it. Again, we have Blake Jones here on the show, baby. A special live episode here on a Thursday, reacting to the 2025 schedule for the New York Jets that came out last night, as it did for all the other NFL teams. Send in your questions. Keep those coming. I also have a list of interrogation that I must do, Blake, to get some of these in. Now, head coach Aaron Glenn said that he wanted to move in silence this offseason. Now, that's not very atypical for the New York Jets, move in silence. That's a very difficult thing to pull off, but it seems like you guys listened to our first-year head coach, Aaron Glenn, because 13 1 o'clock games for the Jets. So it sounds like he asked for move in silence. You said, sure, yeah, no problem, 1 o'clock games.
Yeah, look, it's part of the balance we try to find every year across teams. There's going to be teams that have more prime times or high profile games. There's going to be teams that have more 1 o'clock games. It changes and it fluctuates each year. But look, the bulk of our games are played on Sunday afternoon. And so more likely than not, you're going to have a lot of teams falling into that bucket. We think it's a good fit, but even being within that window, there's a lot of really exciting matchups that we think, yeah, it's a Jets game in the 1 o'clock window, but that might be the game in the 1 o'clock window for a given partner. And I think we look at that and we're excited to see what the Jets could be.
That's a very fascinating segue. That's not your first rodeo, Mr. Blake Jones, because the Jets-Steelers week 1 o'clock, it's juicy for, at a minimum, the Justin Fields reason for the revenge there. But there's a lot of speculation out in the universe that one Aaron Rodgers, one Pro Football Hall of Famer, may be joining the Steelers ranks, which makes that game even sexier than it already is. We have this question coming in from Morning Woody here, who says, obviously, you guys must have figured out that Aaron Rodgers is signing with the Steelers, and that's the reason for the week 1 revenge game between Rodgers and Fields. And Rich Eisen mentioned the same thing last night on the NFL Network stuff. He said, antenna up, that must be what it means. So you guys know that Aaron Rodgers is a Steeler, right?
Yeah, look, I wish we had more information than the rest of you. We're reading the same news updates and breaking news that everybody else is. We don't know right now where Aaron Rodgers is going to be when it comes time to start the season. We do know that it is Justin Fields facing his old team in the Steelers. It's just that traditional big matchup of big brands of the Steelers and the Jets. So it's appealing in that sense. If you add Aaron Rodgers to the mix, I think it adds a lot of other interesting elements to it, but not something that we've got inside information on. Had we known, I don't know, maybe you consider it in a primetime game or something like that, but we got to go with what we know in April and May. And by the time we finally release, still an unknown. Think it's still going to be a great matchup and an exciting one to see in week 1. And like I said, a big part of what's going to make that 1 o'clock window great for CBS.
Yeah, to your point, there's a deadline, right? When the commission announces during the draft, May 14th, baby, it's coming. You guys
got to hit that deadline.
I guess so. So let me ask you, if Aaron Rodgers, and hypotheticals, I'm sure you guys love these, if Aaron Rodgers would have been a member of the Steelers, would this have been a primetime game here in week 1, Jets-Steelers?
It's possible. Like you say, hypotheticals, they can be tough to deal with. We see so many different iterations of the schedule, and any given game can literally move not only 1 o'clock between Fox and CBS or into the 4 o'clock window, but into any of those primetime packages. We saw versions of the schedule. I mean, we look at thousands and thousands of schedules. So we saw versions of schedules with that matchup in a primetime window in a different part of the season. It's hard to tell, hard to predict. We think it landed in a good spot where it's going to get some good attention, good focus, especially coming into week 1. But we think the 1 o'clock window, what we know right now, is going to be the good spot for it.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you have certain teams slotted for things? For instance, right, we just said the Jet Steelers, there's a world where we could have seen that potentially being a primetime game. On the Jet schedule, they have two primetime games. The Week 4 Monday Night Football game against Miami Dolphins. We'll
Yep.
get back into that later. And then
Yep.
you have the Week 11 game, New England Patriots on the Thursday Night Football later in the season. Let's just say Aaron Rodgers would have signed with the Steelers, and then you guys go, ooh, all right, primetime game opportunity, Week 1, this is great. Do you then go, okay, well, we only wanted to give the Jets two primetime games. If we're giving them this one, we got to take one of the other ones away. Is that how it works? Do you guys sort of have a thought process on how many primetime games per team? And if something like that changes, there's ripple effects in the pond that you then switch to something else?
I think we look at it in terms of best overall schedule for the NFL, for the teams, and for our partners, and then for our fans. Like I said, thousands of versions that we look at, and in any given version, you can have this team with one, maybe two more prime times, this team with one, maybe two less prime times. There's a little bit of a give and take from schedule to schedule as we go through this process over and over and over and over again. But not necessarily something where we say, okay, that game became more appealing. In order to allow that into a primetime window, we have to cut this. It's really just feeling out what's the right overall mix, and maybe we lean a little bit more one way on a given day than the other.
To that question about mix here, how much is touchy-feely of like, oh, this one feels like a football game versus the analytics and the numbers and the computers, which I imagine you guys lean on a lot too.
Yeah.
If you had to put like a percentage on it, is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? Lean towards analytics? What is the process there?
Yeah, it's tough. We are definitely pushing in the direction of trying to do more data analytics-based decisions. Probably a majority of that right now. We're looking at projected ratings. We're looking at ranking games individually 1 to 272 based on projected ratings. I want to know what any given game's rating projection could be in a Sunday 1 o'clock window, a Sunday 4 o'clock window, a Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night, any of these variables. What could it be? And then we're going to look at that and figure out how do we get the right balance then of those projections in order to go into all of the different partner packages, and then the right balance for a given team on number of prime times versus Sunday afternoon games.
There is a lot of variables. That's what that means, baby, with this process, of course. This is a common question I see all the time. It's good to bring it back up. Dick Chimney's Burner again saying, you said there are multiple versions of this full schedule. How many versions get created? And is it then voted on? Does Commish, Roger Goodell, does he just have the overall power where you lay 10 in front of him? He's like, this one. How does that process work?
We start literally before the Super Bowl. Wow. We know what those final matchups are going to be at the end of the regular season, and we start running iterations. We know what packages we have to populate. We know everybody's home and away schedule, and we start looking at what the right sequencing could be for any given team. We literally, within our software, create hundreds of thousands of schedules between January through May. Obviously, in the beginning, it's just getting a feel for the matchups and what the right distribution could be. And as we get closer, we get a lot more discerning. All right, this maybe isn't the right fit here, or, oh, we just heard this news about a big offseason change. Let's move this game up into a little bit more high profile window. And we'll literally go through a bunch every day. So we'll create hundreds of thousands. We'll do a deeper dive on analyzing thousands of them, and then we'll do a sit down and full review, literally game by game, team by team, on a couple hundred of schedules that we think fit the right parameters. And then at the end, we're taking those to the commissioner and we're doing daily updates of, here's what we like about this setup that we've got. Here's some things that we might want to adjust if we get the chance. Come back the next day. Okay, we found a couple of more schedules. We like what this one gives us. Here's the things that we may have to give up in order to move forward with this next one. And we just do that over and over again. And ultimately, the commissioner gives us his feedback, makes the final call and final decision. And then he says, all right, we've got a schedule. Let's get ready. Let's put it out to the world.
Blake, how many people are in your team? Last year, we got the great pleasure of Charlotte Carey getting a chance to speak with her, and It's great sort of going around the room to getting great insights. How many people are actually on your team figuring all this out?
Yeah, I think we're up to about 8 now, which is growing exponentially relative to when I joined the team years ago when it was me, Charlotte, Mike North, and Howard Katz.
Wow.
Charlotte's moved on to some new
Yeah.
opportunities, so no longer part of the team for this year's schedule. But we've got a bunch of new people that have joined us. Lucy Popko, Max St. John, Matthew Winston, Josh Helmrich, all joining the team. Ani Bose, of course, has been working with us for years as well. And this has been an interesting one for us where Howard Katz, who's been managing this, the perennial scheduling czar, who's taken us all under his wing in order to see the process over the past few years. This may be his last schedule with the team. And so
Wow.
it was really a cool experience for him to obviously be a critical part of the process, but also to see the way he's interacting with a guy like Mike North in order to be like, Mike's got this and Mike's driving the ship now, and we're all along for the ride.
I think this is a great time to detour into this area. The NFL scheduling phenomenon has become a tentpole event. The NFL loves
Sure.
events, draft, free agency, combine. I mean, they're all great. And to me, scheduling is a big one on it. We have like a scheduling party around here for the
Yeah.
Jets, and immediate reaction is and it goes around the league. When did it become a tentpole event? Because I remember, I say not too long ago, but then all of a sudden years blur, that the schedule just sort of dropped somewhere in April. We're like, oh, cool, draft. So like now that it's its own being, which I love, I prefer it now, even though some people are like, geez, we got to wait forever. But once you get it, it feels like it gets its own full proper flowers as it should as part of the scheduling process. When did that sort of hit where now it's just sort of accepted as another one of these tentpole events?
Yeah, I want to say it was during the COVID offseason in 2020. We had the draft from the commissioner's basement, and we were dealing with a lot of complex unknowns about what is the schedule going to have to be in 2020 to give us some potential flexibility. How are we going to be prepared if this game suddenly can't be played on this date? What's our next solve for that to get through week by week? And so we looked at it in a really different way to solve for a lot of hypotheticals. As you can recall from that time, there was so much unknown about what the world was going to be when we're in April and eventually May of 2020 versus when the season would start in September. So we needed some more time, and we needed to work through a lot more. And so we released the schedule in May that year. And I think we found, you know what, the world kept spinning. Teams could still prepare for the season as far as knowing when their building was going to be hosting a game versus not. How do we prepare, team travel, all of those pieces. And it stuck. And so we found that it used to be, like you said, the week of the draft, we would release it, and then we would all get on a plane and we'd go to the draft site and we'd do the draft. And then we would come back and it would be, all right, back to our regular jobs, and we're just getting ready to start the season. We found that we could use those extra weeks to be smarter, make better decisions. I don't think we've seen draft picks really changing how we approach some games. We've always kept our eye out for draft day trades that maybe involve a veteran player that could move the needle as far as what we may think a team may be doing, or matchups that suddenly become more interesting. And that extra few weeks really lets us like hone in and just we're probably a couple hundred schedules just after the draft, because we feel like we've been reviewing it for months. We know the ins and outs, that we can pick up on those slight differences and really get ourselves down a pretty narrow path to ultimately the final schedule.
It seems like you guys maximize your time. So whether it was the May 14th date or it was in the April date, but just to play devil's advocate, is there a thought that paralysis by analysis, that you guys have been looking at this for so long and your eyes are going over it again and again, and you're going through all these different versions, that there's almost too much? Like now we're over analyzing what we thought was great. We're like, wait a second here, let's do this because of that time on your hands. Or again, is that not really part of the equation?
Yeah, there can be a little bit of that. We try really hard to force the room to take a step back from time to time and say, hold on, what are we trying to accomplish with approach A or B? And what is the right way to look at this? And well, sometimes that's where, checking in with the commissioner as someone who's not necessarily in the room, but ultimately is going to make that decision. He can see something new and be like, you know what? I don't think this is the right direction for us. I liked it better when we were going this way. Or, since we met last week, I've thought about it more and maybe we should go this direction. So that's that good balance of we live and breathe this all day, every day for so long. And when, say, the commissioner suggests something, we can say, actually, that comes with X, Y, and Z other impacts on the game schedule. If we're good with that, great. Otherwise, we may not want to go down that road. So it's a combination of that.
Blake, with how much you guys live and die by the schedule, all the passion that you've clearly talked about that you guys pour into the schedule, is there any egos in the room? And because, like, for instance, you may be working on something and there may be a game on the schedule, maybe it's just a week, and you're like, yeah, baby, this is the Blake Jones part of the schedule. I love this part. And let's say the commission's like, sorry, I don't like that part at all. Do you guys, and especially for you, Blake, you've been there so long, do you have any power to say, hey, man, we each have like a card, a challenge flag? Hey, this is the part that I really want to be in there, and your seniority and everything that you've poured into it. Do you get like your say for whatever it is, your arguments, and not every argument has to go all the way to the hill. Some of them are worth dying for, so to speak. Yep. I don't know if that makes any sense, but do you get some of that action?
Yeah, look, the room that we've got now, it's bigger, but it's great. Everybody's voice is heard. I think we all know that we're working towards the greater sort of goal of the ultimate finished schedule, and we know that all of our input is what gets us there. There are absolutely times where I say, hold on now, if we're doing this, we just have to know that it comes at the expense of these other things. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't go down that new road. We should just all be eyes wide open of we are making a conscious decision that this will happen if we make this new choice. And as long as we all get to a majority consensus, we generally keep going down the right path and we're all on the same page. I think we just want to make sure that we vet these things to each other and we all make the right decision collectively rather than feeling like, oh, I got bullied and I couldn't bring this up in the room. We can all talk and we can all think it through. And ultimately, it's going to go to the top and get that final ruling. And we're just trying to get it to the right place for that final approval.
What's your guys' stance? All these teams now are doing schedule release videos, and now it's a competitive thing, because why wouldn't it be? We're in the NFL. Everyone's competing with everybody. They're trying to one-up each other. What's your guys' perspective on the craziness? Some funny, some, movie, topical. We're getting a little bit of everything right now in the league. What's your guys' stance on all that?
I love it. I mean, it's a cool part about it becoming an event in the NFL calendar is teams are activating on it in such cool ways. I love them. They all really capitalize on the excitement of this day after grinding day after day. And a lot of it is 7 days a week during the off season. And to see all of that work come to fruition in these really cool ways that the teams activate on it, it's really fun. It's kind of a bit of something to enjoy after all of the hard work. So we like them. We share them around. We talk about them in our little scheduling team chat groups. And I think it's great. It's the other side of that is all of the other articles and reporters who pick out things and focus on, oh, it's terrible that they did this, or why'd they do that, or it's a balance, but we do enjoy the team stuff. It's a good way to enjoy finally getting to the end.
Let's get another couple of questions in here as we have Blake on the show. Gator McCluskey, a member of the Boyd Green Coffee Club, appreciate it. The schedule leaks seem to be by design. Can you confirm that? Obviously, we have a schedule for the schedule now where broadcast partners are having their days in the sun where they're able to release some of these. But sometimes there's reporters that are able to get a handle on something, and we start learning those pieces. Are those leaks on purpose? Or are the only design ones the broadcast partner versions we get?
Yeah, from our perspective, the only ones that we want happening are the ones where we work with our partners for a very coordinated release of, hey, we're excited to announce this game that we're going to be featuring this season, the rest to come on schedule release day. We work so hard to maintain that integrity amongst our group, literally in meetings with the commissioner and our security department and others to make sure that we've worked so hard to keep this confidential and make sure that either accurate or inaccurate information is not coming out of this office until it's ready to be public. And part of it is it's great the way schedule release day has turned into that event, and every team getting to talk about those pieces. One, we don't want to ruin it. And two, it just raises concerns with us about like, hey, where's that coming from? We all work really hard to keep this inside, except for the release itself. So that's definitely not by design on our part.
Okay, fair enough. That's good to clarify that. Now, speaking of reporters, I heard ESPN NFL insider Adam Schefter for his latest podcast episode that just dropped right before our show. I got to quickly skim through his Jets version, his intel that he wanted to share, and his reaction to the schedule for the Jets was he says, obviously, the NFL schedule makers don't believe in the Jets. He said 13 1 o'clock games, 2 primetime games. That's my read. That's the message from the NFL. Sorry, pal. You guys don't have Aaron Rodgers anymore. We don't believe in you. What's your response to that from Adam Schefter?
Yeah, look, I don't think that's the case. Having a primetime game in week 11, I think sends a message about featuring the Jets in a high profile window with that Thursday night game against the Patriots. Look, when it comes down to it, the bulk of our games are played on Sunday afternoons. So by default, most teams are going to end up with a good chunk of games within that window. And like I said, a lot of times there's a reason why we want some of those games on a Sunday afternoon to be the key for that 1 o'clock window or the 4 o'clock window. It's not just prime times and those special one-off windows. It's a lot about finding the right balance. I think we're really curious to see what the Jets are going to be this year. And then we love the idea of finding those stories of, you're right, maybe we should have done more prime time. And oh, by the way, in a late week in the season, one of these primetime games isn't what we thought it would be. Let's make sure we highlight this team that's really impressed us. I think it's a little bit of that balance. We're going to wait and see if they should get a little bit more exposure later on, or if they're really going to be that anchor that holds down some of those other windows, even if they aren't primetime.
Yeah, let's get to that because I saw that question in there. Again, another one that comes up. When can flexing start, and what's the process for that? Dick Chimney's burner again, bringing that up.
Yeah.
How does all that work?
Yeah, so it can start as early as week 5. We're a little bit more careful for those early season flexes. But once we get past roughly week 12, we start to get into some more regular flexing on Sunday night and Thursday night. I think it's week 13 when we get into Monday night. Week 12 for Monday night and Sunday night, 13 for Thursday night. And we look at those pretty carefully. It's not just, hey, could you get a little bit better in one of these primetime games and move a better game in? It's, all right, do we clearly have a game that maybe isn't the right fit to be featured in one of these national windows and could help be a good role player on a Sunday afternoon window and swap it out with one of those matchups that really surprised us to become really engaging for our fans? And ultimately, we just want to get our fans into being able to see the most appealing games in the best windows that'll get the most eyeballs on it.
Again, we're speaking with Blake Jones here for a few more minutes here on the show. What are the rules on primetime games? Is there a maximum number? Is there a minimum number? How does that all work?
Yeah, there's no minimum number. Every team, we kind of take them on their own. We generally are not going to be scheduling more than 6 or 7 for a given team when we release the schedule. No surprise, a team like the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be up there.
Of course,
why not? They're in the Super Bowl 3 years in a row, back-to-back champions, didn't win it last year. That makes total sense. And then there's other teams that are going to get their 1 or 2 or 3 games, like the Jets is a perfect example. We also like to look at those Europe games. It's an early start, but that's 2 teams that are being in the spotlight, not only nationally, but internationally as they are on that world stage. We think those are great opportunities as well to showcase some of those matchups. I think the Jets-Broncos matchup is one of those that fans are legit going to want to be planning their day around. Makes a very long day for us when we go from 9:30 a.m. until midnight to get through the Sunday night game. But I think it has the potential to be a really awesome day of football, especially in week 6 with that Jets game starting off the day.
Speaking of those long days, I want to go back. The Jets have a Monday Night Football game week 4, but it's part of a double header. So they're going to have the earlier game. That's at 7:15. What's the process there? Because sometimes I hear, for me, it doesn't matter because I'm a Jets fan, but I do love the overall NFL as well. So if I can watch other games on top of my own, I would love to. what's the thought process there? Because there is obviously some rollover from the Jets game week 4 starting at 7:15 and the next game starting like an hour later. There's going to be cross where 2 games are happening at the same time.
Yep.
Why are you guys doing that as opposed to not doing, I don't know, a 7-10 or a 6-11 or however the timing would have to work where you guys wouldn't have to roll over because you kind of have us, on the leash as an NFL fan. I'm
Right,
watching.
exactly.
So if you bring me, you have it 6-11. All right. Sorry, family. I'm locked in from 8 in the morning till 2 in the morning. That's just how the football gods work. So I'm curious your guys' thought process.
Yeah.
For the double headers, especially when there's crossover there.
So we've got 2 7-10s this year. You'll remember we used to do that week 1 pretty regularly for Monday Night Football to kick off the season. So we're going to go back and we're going to do 2 of those. And we think though that's great. And that's a good way to give our fans a lot of football on a Monday night. It also becomes a lot of football on a Monday night across a long window. The early game tends to be better on the East Coast as far as viewer availability. You go too early, you start to lose the chance for some of your viewers on the West Coast to finish up work, get home, and watch some football. On the other end of it, at that 10 o'clock game, towards the end of that game, you may have people who have to get up and go to work the next day on the East Coast who can't stay up until 1 in the morning and watch that game finish out. So the other piece we look at is the 7:15, 8:15 slight overlap, but we get you a lot of football. It's an extra hour or so. And the other way to think about it is if one of those games wasn't being played on that night, it would be back on a Sunday afternoon at the same time as 5 or 6 other games.
Sure.
So while there is some overlap and it's not completely isolated, it is a good way to get 2 good football games to our fans in a way that they can stick with one over the other if they have an affinity for one particular team or matchup, but also gives them the chance to do a little back and forth once the games start overlapping.
I made a joke earlier that AG said he wanted to move in silence. You guys did him a solid 13 1 o'clock games. But in all seriousness, what are the conversations like between you guys and the NFL teams? Both pre-schedule, once the schedule comes out, receiving complaints. I'm sure you guys never get any of those. How do those conversations work between the teams?
I kind of joked about it before. Every team would say, I would love my bye to be week 9 or 10. Well, we can't fit all the buys in that week. We also have every team that would say, I'd love to play in Green Bay in September and in Miami in December instead of the other way around. Again, not everybody wants that to be the outcome. We can't work that way. So we have conversations with teams. The most important thing we get from them is, when is your stadium available? When is it not available? We need to know you can't schedule a game in my building because there's a concert, or we share a parking lot with the baseball team, and if there's a baseball game that day, we can't have a game the same day. So we start with that, and that helps us build the foundational blocks of what the schedule will ultimately be, so that we aren't forcing a team into one of those conflicts unnecessarily so. And so we look at that, and then we get some of their thoughts. There are teams that have cross-country trips, and sometimes they'll have multiple. Some teams will say, hey, if you can pair my cross-country trips, one right after the other, it's actually better for us. We can't guarantee it. It's like the bye after an international game, but we put it in there. And if we see it, it may make one schedule look a little bit better for one team versus another schedule. And so those things we factor in. We understand then, all right, how are we going to feature each of these 32 teams relative to our broadcast packages? And then how do we put it all together in a way that we know the stadium is going to be available and we can play the game on their field as a home game?
That's fascinating because, for instance, again, I have the Jet schedule in front of me. Week 3, week 4, Tampa Bay, Miami. They're both in Florida. They obviously also had the Jacksonville Jaguars game later. Is it almost like, to simplify it, I guess, like a big ass Excel sheet, and every team you have little notes? Oh, they'd prefer the bye then. They would prefer, hey, the 2 Florida games to be paired up, things of that nature. And you say, cool. And then once you're in the process, you start evaluating some of the notes and see what you can do. You don't take it as gospel and say, well, we could do everything, because obviously you can't. You mentioned a lot of teams are requesting the same sorts of things. But is that basically how it is for the note gathering from the 32 members?
Yeah, we have what we consider to be hard blocks or hard rules about my stadium can't be used for an NFL game this day or that day. And then we have preferences. Like I said, a lot of teams will have very similar preferences, and not everybody can get those preferences. But we look at them and we use them as we go through, especially in the final stages. And we say, all right, we have Schedule A or Schedule B. Which one do we think should be our front runner right now? And we look through, among other things, okay, let's go team by team. Well, this team was hoping for, they don't want their bye after the international game, and here it gives them a home game after their international game. Okay, that could be helpful. That's a bonus. But then the team next to them does have an international game, does want their bye. They also get a home game after their international game. Okay, that team's going to be unhappy with this schedule. It's very hard to get all 32 teams happy. We try to find the right balance that no team is unfairly unhappy, or as we say, they're all equally mad at us, in a way that at least we've done it right if we've treated them all equally.
Okay, so I'm assuming you don't receive many calls. Woo! You guys nailed the schedule. That's beautiful. You guys, you know what? We're going to send you a Christmas card this year.
Right,
I'm guessing
exactly. It's like the only people that take the time to do a Yelp review are more likely going to be the ones that are very unhappy with their experience. So those are the ones that make sure they let us know.
And do you take any of that personally, Blake? Because you get a call. We're using the Jets because this show is a Jets-inspired show, right? Yeah. You get an angry call from Aaron Glenn who doesn't like the 3 road games in a row or this, that, or the other. And do you is that one of those calls where you're like, and you just head nod and accept everything and say, thank you very much. And then what do you then do with that information? How do you not take it personally? Because again, we go back earlier, you poured your blood, sweat, and tears this thing, and you're trying to give as perfect of a version for everybody as possible. And then when you get complaints, whether you mentioned it earlier with the reporters saying, geez, look, the schedule makers totally blew this one in week 4. Like, how do you not take that personally? How do you have those, constructive criticism, but also it's your baby,
Yeah, look, we know there are some pieces that are a necessary evil of putting a schedule together for 32 teams across 18 weeks.
Yeah.
And I could probably tell you each team, okay, if they're going to call and complain, it will most likely be this or this. And so when it comes, one, we're usually expecting it, not necessarily that we think we did something wrong and they caught it, but more so of, I understand where you're coming from, Coach. Unfortunately, it's a step we had to take to pull the ultimate schedule together. We felt like it doesn't unfairly hinder you versus other teams relative to the all 32. Like I said, we try to spread that out equally. But then we do try to take a look as we're going through and say, oh, what was that team's schedule last year? Oh, yeah, they had one of those. They weren't really happy. That was a fair point. We should at least try to not have the same frustrating things happen to teams multiple years in a row. Like I said, most teams will have the same preferences. A lot of teams will have the same complaints. And so we just try to make it so that it's not happening to the same team over and over again.
Blake, do you have any good stories of a coach or owner, general manager, whoever that called with a really good complaint and you'll just never forget it?
I mean, there's been years where we've gotten the follow-up that says, you may have given us the worst possible schedule that could possibly be given to a team. You've really, something I won't repeat, you really did this to us. And I think that team ended up winning the Super Bowl that year.
Wow.
So these things are, everybody has a reaction when the schedule comes out. Good teams, these things, they often tend to level out and the good teams win games, and the teams that are struggling, I don't think it was the sequence of games. I think it was, you didn't have a quarterback after week 4 and your team just wasn't as good as they were. Those types of things. The football tends to level things out, but this is the time of year where we don't have football games. We just have a schedule. So we get reactions on the schedule and we get that. We work hard to try and not, like you said, take it personally, and we let it ride out over the season. And then we make some mental notes of, okay, what are we taking from last year into this year's process, and how do we do it right for this year?
And thank you so much for that. And Gators has great insight. He's really been enjoying this interview. Are we any closer to an 18-game season, pushing the Super Bowl out right behind President's Day? How far away are we from that, Blake?
Oh boy, that's a discussion way above my head. It's something that we're obviously looking at. You see the articles, you hear the commissioner weighing in on it. I think it's something that seems like we may head that direction eventually. It'll be interesting to see how that all then lays out for week 1 through the Super Bowl and what that would mean. But definitely a lot of work going on for it, just to make sure that when we get that signal and that word, we're ready and we're prepared. But as of right now, more discussion amongst commissioner and ownership, more so than at my level.
All right. Well, last question here from Yo Holmes. Blake, how does one become a professional NFL schedule maker? I mean, it's a great question. How the hell did you get here, Blake?
Boy, you got to be lucky and have that opportunity at the right time. It's a function of our NFL broadcasting team. So we all have our jobs that go all year round. Scheduling is part of it. And so our team that we've developed to support not only scheduling, but the regular season, as we go year to year, we work with our teammates to see, all right, who's the good fit to join the scheduling team and help us do what we need to do. At the same time, the offseason keeps going while we're locked in that room. We have such critical members of our team here that basically keep the machine running and keep the NFL getting ready for the schedule while the schedule is being made. They do all the other hard work to say, what did we learn from 2024 about how we broadcast games in our stadiums that's going to make our broadcast better, while the rest of the group is working on where are all these games going to fall with our partners. So it's the broadcasting team. We work as a whole. It's a subset of that team doing the schedule, but the whole broadcast team is actually critical to all of it. Even if they're not in the room every day, they keep everything running and make sure that we can focus on the schedule.
Well, it's amazing that you have this wonderful opportunity you've had for a very long time. And Blake, it's great to virtually make your acquaintance. Thanks for making us smarter on the
awesome
schedule.
To be here.
Appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Blake, I just